No other ancient civilization has been as thoroughly documented and deciphered as the ancient Egyptians. Well, at least that's what many believe. But in reality, the legendary empire of the pharaohs is revealing more and more secrets that shed completely new light on the past. For example, did you know that only 10% of the world-famous Pyramid of Cheops has been explored so far? Or that researchers claim to have discovered a gigantic city beneath the Giza Plateau just a few weeks ago? Today, we'll show you the exciting finds that have been made in Egypt recently and how they are changing the history books. So be sure to stay tuned until the end to learn all the exciting details of these fascinating discoveries. Anyone who held a high position of power in ancient Egypt is sure to have been immortalized in the historical memory of posterity. Well, at least that's what you'd think. But in fact, the remarkable discovery made in Saqqara in 2022 shows us once again how much there is still to learn about the era of the Pharaonic Empire. In fact, archaeologists in the world-famous necropolis not only came across nearly 300 sarcophagi containing over 100 mummies from the New Kingdom period, but also the tomb of a queen whom no Egyptologist had ever heard of before. What is certain is that the mysterious ruler was called Neith, and that she is not mentioned in any of the sources known to us. And although this find initially raises more questions than it answers, the researchers were nevertheless thrilled. Isn't it fascinating that discoveries like this can add such an important new piece to the puzzle of history in one fell swoop? Since then, experts have been trying to unravel the unexplained background of the pharaoh. But even the countless sarcophagi are still shrouded in mystery. Each coffin was decorated with an individual face that indicates the gender of the deceased. Decorated with scenes from the sacred Book of the Dead, the coffins often depict the 4 sons of Horus, who are supposed to protect the organs of the deceased. But not all sarcophagi are the same. While some have 2 lids, another even contains a mask made of solid gold. A hidden city beneath the Giza Plateau? The following report sounds far too crazy to be true. Researchers Corrado Malanga and Filippo Biondi recently announced that they have discovered a fully fledged city underground in Giza. And just so we're clear, we're talking about hidden shafts that reach a whopping 650 meters deep and lead to 2 cube-shaped objects, each with edges measuring 80 meters. All in all, the entire network is said to extend over around 2,000 meters. The project spokesperson subsequently described the discovery as groundbreaking. And in its usual manner, the internet was naturally not at a loss for any interpretation, no matter how astonishing. For once the hidden underground metropolis has been identified, the path to ancient power plants and the legendary Hall of Records seems not too far away. But what did Malanga and Biondi actually see when they plunged into the underground world of the Giza Plateau? Well, nothing at all. Because in reality, the scientists did not personally venture into the invisible city, but found it using a special satellite-based remote sensing method called SAR. And that is precisely one of the main points of criticism. Other experts emphasize that this method is not capable of seeing such great depths. And so it remains that only a direct on-site investigation can reveal what really lies beneath Giza. But whether and when this will happen is still written in the stars. The mummies with golden tongues. Speech is silver, silence is golden. And indeed, this saying takes on a whole new meaning when we consider the exciting discovery made by researchers a few years ago in a cemetery in the necropolis of Cuisna. After all, the mummies buried here were actually given tongues made of pure gold to place in their mouths. However, these were not intended to silence the deceased, but to help them speak to the god of the dead, Osiris. In fact, this glittering burial practice was quite widespread during the Greco-Roman period, and in some cases, golden eyes were even placed on the mummies to ensure they could see properly in the afterlife. In addition, archaeologists also found many other valuable artifacts in the tombs, including ceramic objects, necklaces, and gold jewelry in the shape of lotus flowers and scarab beetles. A bloody trophy cult. The ancient Egyptians are best known for their progressiveness and extraordinary architectural skills. And yet we should not forget that the inhabitants of the Pharaonic Empire sometimes also had very cruel traditions. This was the conclusion reached by researchers in 2023 when they made a macabre discovery in the courtyard of the Hyksos Palace in Avius, a hiding place containing 12 severed right hands that had been buried in pits. The Hyksos was a group of foreign kings who ruled Egypt during the so-called Second Intermediate Period. And although experts were already familiar with ancient Egyptian tomb inscriptions that mentioned severed body parts, this was the first, well, tangible evidence of this burial practice. It is unclear whether the amputations were carried out before or after death, but what is certain is that the hands belong to 11 males and one possibly female individual. When it comes to the question of why, however, the researchers say that we are most likely dealing with the body parts of defeated enemies. Furthermore, some details point to a ceremonial context. The hand pits were placed in such a way that they could not be overlooked. The great care with which the limbs were removed also suggests a ritual context. The Lost Golden City. When researchers say that they have just discovered the Egyptian version of Pompeii, everyone knows what archaeological discovery has been made. But first things first, around 3,400 years ago, Pharaoh Amenhotep III had a magnificent royal city of Thebes built, but it was later abandoned by his successor, Akhenaten. Why he turned his back on the old capital and had a short-lived city of Akhenaten built instead remains a mystery. But the legendary discovery of a royal metropolis in Thebes could finally help us get to the bottom of this persistent mystery. Officially dubbed the Lost Golden City of Luxor and discovered in September 2020, many buildings and artifacts have been astonishingly well preserved under the sand. However, archaeologists are still busy uncovering the city in its entirety. But the excavations so far have already brought to light neighborhoods surrounded by zigzag walls, including a bakery district teeming with everyday objects. Researchers have also identified 3 different palaces and the location of the city cemetery. The Labyrinth of Harawa. According to tradition, Pharaoh Amenhotep III once had a gigantic site built from the ground up that easily eclipsed all other colossal structures in the world. The small but crucial problem, however, is that no one knows where the so-called Labyrinth of Harawa is located. What is certain is that Herodotus visited the above-ground area of the complex himself and spoke of a total of 3,000 magnificently decorated chambers, divided equally between above and below ground. Furthermore, the complex is said to have been covered by a continuous roof and built directly next to a huge pyramid. Ultimately, however, the labyrinth is said to have been destroyed in ancient times, but exactly when and who was responsible for this is still the subject of research. In 2008, however, experts finally made a sensational discovery beneath the hot desert sand. A scan of the Harawa site revealed some striking details that strongly suggest that a huge site lies dormant beneath the surface. The mystery is that, although the research results have been confirmed by other teams, no professional excavation has been carried out to date. An unknown ruler rarely comes alone. As mentioned at the beginning, our modern list of ancient Egyptian rulers is far from complete. And the 3,600-year-old tomb found a few weeks ago in the necropolis of Abydos once again underscores this fact. Just like the gruesome hand find, this chamber also dates back to the time when the Hyksos kings ruled Egypt. But unfortunately, we have no idea which pharaoh was once laid to rest in the approximately 5-meter-high chamber carved into the limestone. The simple reason for this is that the original grave goods, the sarcophagus and other furnishings were stolen long before the grave robbers. But at the same time, the remains of inscriptions leave no doubt that an important king once began his journey to the afterlife here. The Shrine of the Falcon. Why the 1,700-year-old structure, which archaeologists uncovered in ancient Egyptian Berenike in 2022, is called a falcon shrine is quickly explained. After all, it contained the remains of 15 falcons. However, the birds of prey were not buried intact. They were all literally beheaded. In another room at the site, researchers came across a Greek inscription stating that it was inappropriate to cook a head here. Why the birds were beheaded in the first place is just as unclear as the question of what the two unknown deities immortalized here on a stone monument are all about. However, researchers generally assume that the falcons were beheaded as a sacrifice to the gods of the sanctuary. This is a perfectly plausible idea, since one of the mysterious deities also had a falcon head on its shoulders. How the Egyptians expanded their consciousness. It is common knowledge that the peoples of antiquity sometimes gave their religious rituals and ceremonies a little helping hand. More precisely, this means that they consumed intoxicating, hallucinogenic, or soporific substances during their rituals to help expand their consciousness. And although ancient Egyptian depictions and texts have long suggested that such substances were also taken by the inhabitants of the Pharaonic Empire, clear evidence of this has been lacking until now. But now, chemical analysis of the so-called Bez vessel has provided the first concrete evidence of ancient Egyptian trips. The vessel in question dates from around 200 BC and was dedicated to the protective god of the same name. Previously kept in the Tampa Museum, examination of scraped residue revealed that they contained extracts from 3 psychoactive and medicinal plants. Traces of honey, sesame, licorice root, and grape juice indicate that these plant extracts were part of a sweet, probably blood-red potion that was drunk during rituals in honor of the protective god. News about Cleopatra. She is not only considered one of the most beautiful women of all time, but also one of the most mysterious. This is primarily because, to this day, no one knows where Cleopatra is actually buried. However, Dominican researcher Kathleen Martinez is convinced that the Queen of the Nile rests in a secret chamber beneath the temple complex of Tepesiris Magna. And indeed, this exciting assumption gained new momentum a few months ago. After all, archaeologists diving in the sunken part of the temple city discovered over 330 coins bearing Cleopatra's portrait, ceremonial vessels, amulets, jewelry, and a necropolis with 30 burials. However, one artifact in particular stood out from the rest of the finds: a small marble bust of a woman wearing a royal diadem, which, according to Martinez, could be none other than Cleopatra herself. If this is indeed the case, the last pharaoh may have looked very different from what we have assumed until now. The subscription button still looks the same as usual. Simply click on the thumb and then on subscribe to never miss another video from us. See you soon!